All right, everybody. Great to be back here. My name is Matthew Britz, coming at you from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Excited about our guest we have on the show today. This is somebody that both Jim and I have admired greatly for her leadership and inspiration
Oh,
around helping women and men, but really targeting women at being self-sufficient, helping families be self-sufficient. But first, my friend, my business partner, Mr. Jim Gale. How are you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic, Matthew. You're so right. I'm so excited to share what we did this morning. Corey Andrulot, he and I are writing a book, and he's here with a friend, Ahmed. And we got up in the morning, and we went and grabbed some sweet potato vines. And we literally knocked on the doors of our neighbors. And we met with four neighbors, and every single one of those neighbors was so thankful to receive our sweet potato vines. And three out of the four of them were aware that things in this world are not as they should be. And they were thankful for that reason as well. And two of the four were already growing some food. So it was just a fantastic day. Then I went and picked my daughter up at school, and I had I had about another 8 sweet potato starts in buckets. And there's this little line to pick up our 5-year-old daughters. So anyway, I said, does anybody want sweet potatoes? They all went. Everybody said, yes, please. So just in one day, from that one action, there could be thousands of pounds of sweet potatoes, actually hundreds of thousands of pounds, quite literally, over the next 18 months. So it was fun.
Wow. And don't you have another plan too to do something with some homeless and sweet potatoes? Are you talking about doing something there too real soon?
Absolutely. We're meeting with this. We discussed this with this guy, Chris. He lives in a homeless camp down about almost 3 hours from here. Corey is bringing sweet potato starts back with him. And then they're going to go to the homeless camp and they're going to video the process of putting sweet potatoes and moringa in the ground all over the homeless camp. And our goal is to inspire action, is to inspire more people to do the same because the food supply is in big trouble. And here comes Marjory Wildcraft, right? As Matthew said, we are big fans of your work, Marjory. I mean, for decades now. You are so successful in real estate. And all of a sudden, what transitioned you? What inspired you to take the path that you are on now?
I wish I could say it was a wonderful moment, but it was actually the most terrible moment of my life, which actually, in retrospect now, is the most wonderful.
Yeah.
But at the time it happened, I mean, I was shaking. I had panic attacks. And it all could come down to one moment, actually. So, yeah, I was very successful. I was on, my business was so successful. Robert Kiyosaki, who had been my mentor, asked me to be on his infomercials. I was on national television for like 4 years with Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And, things were going great. I was making so much money. And I always like to be involved in my community. I was volunteering on a program to get locally grown food, organic food into the school system. One of my neighbors happened to be the president of the Texas Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association. And we formed a volunteer group, and it was like a whole group of movers and shakers. This was going to be a slam dunk. And we were going to start with this one little rural elementary school near me called Red Rock Elementary. And that project was a complete and total disaster. It was a complete failure. And that's what caused me to like completely freak out and sell my business and everything. And the failure was, and it wasn't, there was actually tons of money, federal money, grant money, state money for this to happen. The teachers wanted it. The parents wanted it. Even the students wanted it. We had small garden beds and they loved the fresh produce. Everybody wanted it. It's just, there weren't enough farmers in all of Bastrop County to provide part of the vegetables for one small rural elementary school. And Texas has some big counties. And this is just east of Austin. I mean, we're not talking about, it's a progressive area, right? And I knew, and everybody in that meeting knew, there's only 4 days worth of food in the grocery stores in inventory. There's no backup warehouses of food. It's all a just-in-time trucking system. The food comes an average of 1,500 miles. Anything that ever happens to any of that, we're going to have a problem. And like I said, I got into growing food the way a lot of people right now are getting into growing food. And that is, I was completely freaked out. And basically God picked me up and shook me and said, and I was like, but I am the wrong person. Like, I don't know anything. My background is in engineering and then in real estate and money and investments. And apparently I was the right person for that. So, and it came at a cost. Because, I mean, this is like the early 2000s, right? And back then, when you were a prepper, you were completely nuts. And one of my sisters-in-law said it best, and I'm going to do my best to imitate her Texas accent. And she goes, Marjory, you're just crazy, girlfriend. This United States of America, we're never going to have supply chain problems. We're never going to have empty shelves in our grocery stores.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, I got the chills. I've heard the same thing so many times. Oh,
I know, right? And I said, look, I can't unknow what I know, and whatever I've done up to my life. Yeah, I mean, making more money, everybody can make money. Anybody who wants to make money can make money, really. There's not many people who know how to grow food. And in every single crisis throughout history, and there have been thousands upon thousands of crises, civil war, natural disasters, famine, backyard food production always is what the people revert to, and that's what saves the day. So I said, well, I'm going to focus on the most important thing, and I'm going to use the life energy that I've been given to focus on this problem. And that's all I've been doing now for about 20 years is, first of all, learning and then teaching people how to grow lots of food, even if they have no experience, they're older, or they're out of shape.
that's just so amazing. So I believe in the First World War, it was called Liberty Gardens. In the Second World War, they were called Victory Gardens, right?
Yeah.
And then during the Great Depression, what saved millions of people's lives is simply backyard food production. But the kicker is that at that time, a huge percentage of people were already growing food. They lived in the country. Now, well, actually, it's getting better in the last 4 years, but let's say 5 years ago, the numbers of people growing food in their backyard was down astronomically, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I say, look, could we lose a critical skill like being able to read and write? How long does that take? Well, it only takes 2 generations to lose such a critical and fundamental skill. And it has been more than 2 generations since the last big push, which was the Victory Gardens in World War II. But here's a really inspiring fact, and that is when the Victory Gardens started to roll out, 20 million novice gardeners produced 40% of the produce consumed in the United States in the first year.
Boom!
Yeah. Like, so we can do this and we can turn this around. And that's part of the reason that I created the Grow Network. That's why I'm working with the Earth Council. Is the great thing about humans is we learn and we adapt, right? So if you give us the resources laid out in a clear, concise, easy way to get, we can figure this out and we can do it and we can transmit, just like you were talking about the sweet potatoes. You can take one and turn it into thousands, and the same thing with, the knowledge of how to grow food in your backyard. We can cut out years and years of problems and have it be something that you can do right away.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah. And the great news today is that access to that information is really available all over the place. And that if people are open-minded to go look for it, if they're eager in that regard, they can find it. They can find people like you with a simple internet search, both website or YouTube, places like that. Take that knowledge and begin to apply it. And as Jim has often said, start with keeping a few seeds from that piece of produce that you bought, or go buy a sweet potato, keep it, get it started in the ground, and that turns into more and more. So it's not that a cost prohibitive thing or a lack of availability to information that's the limiting factor. It's just the desire to get out and do it. And if you have that desire, which if we end up in a serious food supply crisis, the desire will all of a sudden appear real fast.
It's not if. It's not if, Matthew. It's coming. And I mean, it'll be plenty obvious even just in a few months from now. The global food supply has been destroyed or altered or whatever, but we're not, even here in the United States, 10% of the US crop is not going to come forward, and the estimates may be a lot larger than that. This flooding in Brazil, flooding in China, war in Ukraine. Global food production is way down, and I'm estimating 35 to 40%. That's huge because that's on the back of previous years of all kinds of problems. Yeah. And you really, I've spent 20 years teaching people how to grow food and looking at what's the easiest way to grow food and produce lots of food. And I've drilled it down. I've cherry picked the 3 easiest methods that produce the most calories and nutrition. And Matthew, it's at backyardfoodproduction.com. I've got a free webinar there because I know this is a time when people don't, I'm conserving money, right? Everybody's conserving money. I don't care what the government says about their lame 2.5% inflation. That's complete baloney. There you go. Thank you. Backyardfoodproduction.com. It's a free webinar. And I cherry picked the 3 easiest things that somebody who knows nothing, maybe they're older, they're out of shape, you have a bad back problem or something. This is something that you can do in a backyard size space. And I show you can produce half of your own food very easily in about a half an hour a day. And, Jim, you've been experiencing it over there at Galt's Landing. And they're just the productivity once you get into it and you start working with nature. It's incredible.
It's such joy. It's like it calls me every morning. I wake up and the first thing I do after my bathroom duties is just go outside and walk around the food forest. It's so amazing. It's so joyful. It's a healing center. It's like, it's so beautiful. And I read Bill Mollison wrote at one point, he said, I can spend 30 minutes planting food and I can have 6 months worth of food from that 30 minutes. And I didn't believe it. When I first heard that, I said, nah, that just can't be the case. Well, what we just did today will produce enough calories to feed multiple families. You get 9 months of nature doing what nature does, and there will be millions of calories coming from those sweet potato starts just in this area.
I as I said, I've spent a couple of decades, and it's kind of like been banging my head against a wall, trying to get people to realize that, for me, it was a healing journey, right? As I said, for years, I woke up with night sweats and horrible nightmares. And then as I learned to grow food, so many things began to heal. And the root chakra, especially the connection to the earth, a sense of security, a deep sense of security. Right? We've got mental health issues right now that can all be solved with a small garden, maybe a flock of chickens. That can all go away. But also what went away are like my allergies, all other kinds of problems, and now I know what we're facing, right? I think anybody who's half awake knows what we're facing. It's going to be extraordinarily difficult. I feel comfortable going into this because I've got skills. I know how to provide basic needs of food and medicine. So this will heal you. It will heal you on every level possible. It'll heal you on the physical level, just with the nutrients and getting outside in the sun and moving around a little bit. It'll heal you on the emotional level because you won't be as worried or stressed out. It heals you on the spiritual level. And I know both of you know that you get out there, and so you're working directly with the forces of creation with your hands. Like you are actually working with creation. You're helping to move this, or you're moving that, or you're in alignment, and you start getting little intuitive nudges, or you start seeing, it's just magical what starts to happen. So it heals you on a spiritual level too. Every single level that's possible can happen in backyard food production.
Oh, that is so true. And that is exactly my experience with it. And everybody that comes here so far, we're at 100%. And that's probably, it's way over 1,000 people have visited here and gotten tours. And not one of those people have ever left and said, this place sucks. Like, it's 100%. They're all like, you can feel it. You can feel it's like a symphony of frequencies and life and sounds and smells and sights. And it's just epic. And everybody can do it. Go ahead.
I took a backyard. So I'm here in Puerto Rico, and I'm in an average, neighborhood, and I'm renting. It's a crazy situation, but I'm renting this house. I knew I'd only be there for about 8 months. And the Puerto Ricans here, they like to just completely take a weed whacker and take the grass and everything down to the dirt and just have it looks like a vacant parking lot or something. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And I spent 8 months and I revitalized the avocado tree and pruned the banana trees, planted a bunch of other trees, guadules, papaya, guanabana, all kinds of trees. And then I've got all kinds of food, cassava, calabaza, which is these gigantic squashes, and tomatoes, and then all the herbs, basil and rosemary, mint. And that whole yard now, when you walk in there, it's just, wow. Like, it's just night. And that happened in 8 months. I mean, it's just night and day. And you're right. The feeling of it, the peace and the calm. And, we made a little area with some chairs. You can sit out there. You're surrounded by food. You're surrounded by life. You're surrounded by plants that are happy and healthy and, generating oxygen for you. And you're giving them your carbon dioxide. It's magical. And I really think, I've reflected on why has it been so hard to get people to understand how wonderful this is. Yeah. And I started noticing, if you watch a movie and if there's going to be a character in there that's a farmer, he's always portrayed as like some kind of idiot.
Yep.
Or if you see people growing food, they're migrant workers that are desperate and have nothing else that they can do. Or if somebody has a garden, it's probably somebody who's old and doddering around with Alzheimer's. I mean, they really don't want you to grow food. And they control the media. Yeah. And they've been doing this for decades. They basically have programmed us to believe that it's horrible, it's difficult, we're going to hate it, it's drudgery, because they don't want us to grow food.
Gosh, I've been doing videos about this exact topic. This is the biggest psyop in the history of humanity. And it started in the garden, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to end back up in the garden, right? As we heal from this trauma, this fear, this ignorance, and the poor snake gets the blame for it all, but really it's bigger than that. And when I look back at shows, like any shows of the Middle East or any shows, old shows, they almost never show a Garden of Eden type of paradise.
Yeah. Or you look at the future ones, like, just total desert. And I'm like, how are people eating, or just everything is so unrealistic in our world. Yeah. And that's one of the other, some people, like, identity theft is up. It's because people don't know who they are anymore. Yeah. And one of the great things about growing food is it will put you in touch with reality in a wonderful way. Like, not only with the food you're producing or with, you're dealing with death regularly, you're dealing with birth and regeneration, you're dealing with the whole cycles and rhythms. And it really is just incredibly wonderful. And I do believe that it has been absolutely programmed into our population because we're a lot easier to control. Yeah. If they have the food supply and, and they say jump, you'll say how high if it's for a loaf of bread and you don't have anything to feed your kids. Yeah. Right. So no, they don't want you to grow food. They say that actually probably the great blight that happened in the potato crop of the Irish back in the 1800s was probably the English doing it because the Irish were getting too, they were getting too free.
Yep. Yep.
There's a very good conversation that's very likely, and I wouldn't be surprised if it were true. And the same thing is coming down now. We have a centralized food supply, which is absolutely toxic, by the way. It's not worth eating. There's nothing in a grocery store. We used to say, oh, you could be a perimeter shopper, right? Yeah. There's nothing in there, right? And organic, the best you can hope with organic, since it's been usurped by the USDA since in the last decade, the best thing you can hope is it'll have a little less chemicals. Yeah. It doesn't have any greater nutrient density. It's not better quality food. Really, we're down to where you have to grow your own. In fact, so the tagline for the Grow Network is homegrown food on every table. And to me, it's kind of a joke because honestly, our food supply with the food system we have, it takes 10 calories of energy to get 1 calorie of food to your table, right? Oh. That is completely unsustainable, right? That is totally ridiculous. And you know what? The whole thing is going to collapse one way or another. And what you're going to go down to is homegrown food. So the homegrown food on every table has always been kind of a joke, because that's what's going to happen. It's not, it's, I have a great mission statement. It's a mission statement that's going to happen whether I do anything or not, because that's the way the world's going to go.
And for the history of humanity, that's how it was until just the last, couple hundred years, right?
Yeah. That's actually what's wonderful about it, is it's in your genes. It's in your ancestry. Pretty much everybody in your ancestry going back grew food in some way or another, right? Or they wouldn't be alive, right? They're also survivors. They made it through whatever. Or so you are a survivor, because you wouldn't be here if your ancestors weren't into producing food, right? Or into figuring out how to navigate that civil war or that famine or that flood or whatever. You are the product of many, 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 many generations of survivors, and all of them grew food. And when you really start to get in touch with this, I was shocked at the amount of resonance I had with it and how much I love it. And this is going to be a part of my life, regardless if we go through the apocalypse or not. I mean, it's just such a wonderful lifestyle.
That's right. It's not out of fear. It's out of joy, and the realization that the more we do it, the more joy we get. It's the most selfish thing we could ever do, is love the land and love thy neighbor.
Yeah. And when you heal the earth, the earth is a living entity. It is. And we were chatting just for a moment before the show, and we were talking about this year with the increased, I'm going to have to study on this, but every time I turn around, there's a new volcano popping off, and the hailstorms that have been coming with these baseball size hail, even in Texas, or, the massive flooding all over the planet. The earth is going through a big purge, just as we are humans going through it right now. It's the earth. When you start to treat the earth well, I just love this avocado tree. I mean, swear to God, this thing was just about dead when I got there, and I started watering it and nurturing it and pruning it and taking care of it and weeding some stuff around it. And that tree has got so much beautiful new growth, and it's so happy. And I'm just like, I firmly believe, as much of the earth that I take care of, the earth will also take care of me. And I believe that's a truth. So, start taking care of whatever little patch of land you have.
Yeah. And we operate like we're separate from nature. I think it's one of our biggest problems or things that we don't really consider, is that we think of ourselves as separate from, and we treat it as something that we control, right? Mm-hmm. We have the power over the earth. That's why we keep these nice manicured lawns, to show everybody how much control we have over it. Yet that is the number one harm, us thinking that way. If we start realizing and operating like we are part of nature, not separate from, we will do things in a much different way, which will produce much different results. That really will provide, in my belief, abundance for everybody.
Yeah. I am so glad you brought that up, Matthew, because one of the things that we as small producers we have huge advantages over the commercial systems. And that is because we can work with nature. And so the basic principle, as Jim is well aware of, the concept of a food forest. And on a food forest in a small space, you might have a big tree, then you've got, some smaller bushes, and then you've got a lower understory of herbs or, some maybe beneficials. And then you may have something vining up in there. I mean, when you get into a real mature food forest, you can have 7 layers of food or medicine growing in the same small area. Huge amount of production, right? Vast production. They can't do that with the commercial systems because it has to be automated and mechanized. And you can't automate and mechanize that kind of connection and interconnectivity and vibrancy of life. So we can produce huge amounts more food with way less water and definitely no chemicals. It's so much better production. And that's by working with nature. And I find the more that I work with nature, of okay, well, let me put so I've got the ducks and I've got a pan of water. They love to get in that pan of water and they bathe and they splish and they splash and they poop and do stuff. And it's fantastic. I put that pan of water under a tree that I want to be fertilized, and those ducks do their thing. I dump the pan of water. The next day I move the pan to another tree, fill that up with water.
Wow.
The ducks just go there. And I've just got this wonderful liquid fertilizer. The ducks are happy because they're in the shade playing around. That's nature. I didn't have to buy any fertilizer anywhere, it's so simple and the more you learn to work with nature, the more hugely productive you can be. So you're absolutely right, Matthew.
Yeah. And it's so let's talk about the Earth Council a little bit, because Marjory, I'm just so thankful and glad that you are an Earth Council member. And with what's going on right now, the question that the Earth Council is asking is, how do we scale this? Like, there's, for lack of a better term, there's a lot of different ways to say what's going on. You could use biblical, spiritual terminology or military terminology. So just for simplicity, let's just say this is some type of war, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so how do we win the war? Or let's say it's a game. This is a game. Okay, how do we win the game, right? Well, we win the game by letting go of all of these control mechanisms and then getting through them. So one of the things that keeps coming to my mind is, how do we take the current systems that are using massive amounts of resources, and how do we turn the dial so we allocate those resources in a way that is more beneficial? It's a very logical question. So now working with Andre Norman and his 650,000 inmates that have iPods where he puts up the content. These inmates, and Matthew and I had an opportunity to talk with some of them with Andre not too long ago. One of the things we asked them is about growing food and tending to animals. They all jumped around with so much excitement. So now, with your 20 years of education, that you've got libraries of how to do things, imagine these 650,000 inmates turning into our new growers.
Yeah. And they show that the rates of recidivism, which means returning back to prison, just drops to almost nothing when they learn how to grow food and they learn to be productive like that. And I believe that is the biggest testament to the healing power. If you could take somebody who's been like the worst part of society, a felon who's been in prison, incarcerated, treated like nothing, a slave, and you teach them how to grow food, and then they don't ever go back into that system. Yeah, like that's powerful. So I am super stoked about getting a bunch of the programs into that system, because those people are strong. And honestly, a lot of those guys are going to be the ones who survive this. This period is going to be pretty tough, unfortunately, because there is a direct correlation with the price of food and the amount of violence. And it's actually a mathematical model that, it's very well known. So it's going to get really rough out there. But Jim, what I love about the Earth Council is that we do have so many solutions for so much. We got Theo, who helps people with trauma. And then I'm working with Pat and Will they have these microbes. Right now, the U.S. government is condemning farms all over the United States. And they're taking, if you condemn a farm and say, oh, it's got forever chemicals, then that farmer has to shut down. They can't grow food anymore. And they can't sell their land for anything, because who's going to buy that? Well, Pat and Jim have these microbes that go in there and they eat up the heavy metals and they destroy the PFAS and they take apart the GMOs and the glyphosates, and it turns it into healthy, vibrant, nutrient soil. And I'm actually in the middle of an experiment of where I've got a garden bed, and I took some really awful soil that we have just got the test results back that does have PFAS in it. And I've been applying the microbes. In about another month, I'm going to be taking another set of soil samples in there. It's been going for a little over a month now. Send them back to the lab, and I will have absolute proof that these microbes work. But that's just we have so many solutions. We have so many. I think we're on the verge of 0 point energy coming out available on the planet also. So,
speaking of 0 point energy, a food forest is a free energy system, right?
Yeah.
Once you get it designed and installed, and once it gets kind of a little bit mature enough to be sustainable on its own, it produces free energy, calories forever. you
Yeah.
know, it's so magical. And you're right. We have all of the solutions. So it's a matter now of organizing effectively. And that's what we're here to do is simply organize.
Yeah,
Bring,
and get the message out there and let people know. I love that quote from Bucky. I'm a big Bucky fan. I've been studying Bucky for 30 years now. Um, and he says, don't fight against the existing system. Just create a new system that's so compelling that everybody just leaves the other one. They just abandon it. And I do see a lot of people abandoning the existing system. I'm not sure that we have a coherent vision of what the future is, but I am very, very hopeful because, I think that human creativity has been suppressed for many, many millennium, honestly.
yes.
And as that become released and we can network and we can talk and we can create, I just have, I think it's going to be amazing. Like 20 years from now, what is going to be incredible with what humans are doing and what they can do. But we do have to win this war. And you do not ever win a war on an empty stomach.
That's right. An army fights on their stomach. This is a strategy that was well defined by Henry Kissinger, the head of the Council of Foreign Relations, 50 years ago in 1974, when he said, if you want to control people, control food. And that fellow met with every U.S. president to help get this strategy going throughout the whole system. So, yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. And they're pulling the plug on it now, which I have to say I have a love-hate relationship with because that system is completely toxic. It's horrible. What we do to animals to raise them for meat or eggs is just completely barbaric.
Yeah.
And you should never eat that food just for what is the energetics that's in that meat or in those eggs? Not to mention all the chemicals, but the horrible, horrible life that those creatures live through. But then we've got Joel Salatin on the council who's, talk about incredibly humane and wonderful lives that his animals have and demonstrates a way to really, really produce food that just creates more and more abundance on the land. What an incredible gift that Joel is, especially to the Earth Council. So.
In his land, by using his biomimicry method of moving the animals from pasture and paddock to paddock, he went from 1 inch of soil on average on his land to 8 inches. So while he's producing better meat and more nutrient dense meat with very happy, healthy animals, he's building life into the system. So he proves that all of this story about cows is just BS. It's a lie simply to control the food supply.
Oh my God, I saw that Bill Gates has invested in a vaccine that will prevent cows from farting. And I'm like, if you don't realize that we are at the end of the world as we know it, then that one fact right there should push you over the edge. So but let me go back to the love-hate relationship. I mean, the commercial food supply is absolutely toxic. It's absolutely barbaric. And yes, it absolutely needs to be dismantled. And actually, that's what's going on right now. It is being dismantled. Now, the ones who are dismantling it are the ones who created it, and they're doing it for very, very nefarious reasons. They want to reduce the population, and they want to control us. They want us to get corralled into CBD seeds or whatever their latest plan is to completely control and manipulate everything. So the destruction of it is a good thing. But on the other hand, we don't want what they're offering, which is lab-grown meat or, ground up insects or God knows what. The whole concept of being able to grow your own food or having a local food shed, which is a combination of you and your backyard, as well as small farmers, and then trade with other local regions. That's what we need to get back to, and the food will be so good tasting.
Oh, God. Yes.
It will be. I know people sometimes have said to me, especially those big guys, like, I'm a meat and taters person. And I'm like, if you have never grown your own vegetables, then you really don't know what vegetables taste like. You really don't. The stuff in the grocery store, it doesn't have any taste. No wonder kids don't like vegetables. It's horrible.
Yeah.
My own kids, when I was raising them, every now and then I grew certainly most of the produce, and we'd buy a lot of meat from local farmers. Most of our food was homegrown. And every now and then, I get behind on this or that or the other, and I just buy a store-bought broccoli, and I put it on that, cook it the way I always do. And I noticed my kids would never eat it.
Wow.
But all the stuff that I grew, they ate in quantity, especially if you have boys. Oh my God.
Yeah.
They eat. They eat in quantity. But yeah, if we put any of the stuff that I bought from the groceries, they wouldn't, they knew. They wouldn't.
It's amazing. There's the innate knowing of things. And that's why people are so diseased, because they're losing that connection with their own inner knowing, understanding.
And what shocked me was, so I was homeschooling my daughter, and I joined a homeschooling collective, and it was at this local church where she would go and study, and I taught some classes there, and I created a little garden bed, and some of the kids were not from families that had very like-minded values, and actually a lot of the kids were totally excited when they got a Lunchable. I'm like, oh my God, my daughter Kimber always showed up with this amazing whatever, local food and homegrown and beautifully done. And so I'm creating this garden bed, and I'm like, the kids are super excited because, they helped me build it, right? And I'd let them go ahead and use the electric drill, to build the sides, and they're digging in the dirt and playing around. And they had a really good time building the bed, and we unload the soil and we plant all the plants. And while I'm doing this, in the back of my mind, I'm going, oh my God, is this going to be one of the biggest disasters of my life? Because these kids actually think a Lunchable is good food, I was shocked that those kids, so what we did is we put little cups of ranch dressing in the refrigerator. And on break time, on recess, we said, look, whenever you want, you go get a cup of one of these little, one of those little things of ranch dressing. And you can go out there and you can eat, a chard leaf or a lettuce leaf, or eat the leaves of the broccoli, or, we grew a bunch of stuff. And I was shocked at how much those kids loved it. And after a while, we never had to provide the ranch dressing. They just went out on breaks, and they were so proud of what they were growing, and they loved it. And these are kids that had hardly ever eaten anything fresh or green, or, no fresh produce. And they loved it. And they knew, that something in them knew, right? It was incredible. Yeah.
God, I love that. That is, and we have the same experience. My daughter and I, we go out treasure hunting, which is just picking whatever fruit's available almost every day. It's so much fun, especially when it's a little cooler out. Now, when it's 97, it's not as enjoyable, but it's still awesome for me.
Well, you learn to schedule your day. So, I'm here in Puerto Rico. We just had Hurricane Ernesto go through. I think about 1 million people, about a third of the population now, don't have electrical power.
Wow.
And I'm not sure about water. I'm living in an off-grid house. I've got Starlink and backup solar, and that's how, because but honestly, so many people here, every month the power goes out. So,
Wow.
we know how to deal with it. But as a homesteader or as a backyard farmer, which everybody's going to be that makes it through this period, you kind of plan, okay, so it's hot in the middle of the day. So that might be a time when I'm in the garage where it's a little bit cooler, and I'm going to finally get around to building that automatic waterer for my livestock, or I'm going to take a nap at this point in time. When I lived in Texas, which was blazing hot, I'd get up at 5 and work until about 9 or 10. Then I'd jump in the pond and cool off and go into the house and do stuff during the day. And then you go back out in the evening. So you begin, again, your lifestyle really starts to reflect the world you live in. And you can always make it work, because people have everywhere from, deserts to the Arctic, there's humans have figured out wonderful lifestyles. So, it just takes a little adapting. But yeah.
And I wonder myself, I've studied a lot of the kind of like hidden history, right? And what was it really like when you go back hundreds, thousands of years, tens of thousands of years? You've got so many things that have been manipulated around our history. Did we already have free energy, right? Were there already structures and things that were at work for humanity at that time, or whatever the civilizations were like. I don't know. But you see, there's a lot of clues that things aren't really what we've been told, and that there's a whole lot more to the history of this place, whatever it is. And they don't want us to know about it. Why?
That's
Why?
that's absolutely true. It's our whole. We are like a population without a memory. We're all have amnesia. We don't know what our history is. So much of it has been obfuscated.
Yes.
So much of it has been obfuscated. And you're right. The pyramids, the Great Pyramids in Egypt, we cannot build them today. And in fact, repairs that we have made to them 50 years ago are now falling apart, whereas the main structure, of course, is, still there. And, did they have, they probably did. I mean, and then what great changes have come and gone, or are there natural cycles where, vast numbers do get wiped out and then we rebuild again, or we don't know. And I think that's going to be a wonderful thing in this time period going forward. I know there's a lot of people who are really keen to try and piece together real human history. But I just saw a quote that said, if you don't know your own history, it's like a tree without roots.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And his story is written by the winner, and they've been burning books throughout history. They've been doing this stuff. Controlling the narrative is controlling the mind of the asset or of the sheep or of the slave, right? So freeing the mind is step one, and deciding that we are free, that we are deciding to be free. That's the first step in winning the war and winning the game.
One thing I've always had some questions about is, like, why did they destroy all of the bells?
Yeah.
I want to get a bell. I really do. I want to get a bell and put it up somewhere and have it ring like for prayers in the morning and the evening. One of those one. Why did they change the musical scales?
Yeah.
They changed.
Some of those bells were 50 feet high, like just massive things that were destroyed. And why?
And they
Another
made
one is
beautiful.
organs.
Yeah,
beautiful, right? And then the organs, these massive pipe organs. And why are they called organs? And what do those frequencies have to do with our healing, right? And did people go into these gigantic cathedrals and treat them more as a healing center instead of a place that everybody's going to practice religion, right? And when you played the organs, did it resonate this frequency through the air that helped people heal?
That's right. Yeah. And those bells it was a resonant frequency that helped the whole community. And people go, oh, they've just started this thing with, deplatforming you or shadow banning you on Facebook or YouTube. And I'm like, no. That's been going on. In 535 AD, there was a very concerted effort by the ruling powers at that time to take out all the references of reincarnation in the Bible. They've been manipulating this stuff forever. We have no idea of our own history. And you're absolutely right. There's all kinds of wonderful, some of the buildings you look at. Wow. How do they build those massive, beautiful, cathedrals or temples or, there's so much we don't know. So I think it's a very, very, very exciting time. And I'm very optimistic about the future. In fact, I hadn't realized that most of my life, I always really struggled with depression and a sadness. And I always would question like, why, what? And I think that subconsciously everybody knows that this reality has been managed and controlled by very nefarious powers. And it didn't seem like there's anything you could do about it. They have the banking, they have the financial, they have the educational, the medicinal, the legal systems, the governmental systems, transportation. I mean, everything, like they have, this kind of grip on you. But I feel so excited because I think that we can, as this whole thing collapses, there is a possibility for humans to regain humanity again and to rebuild all of these structures in ways that make sense. And we do have the knowledge and we do have the skills. We could grow incredible amounts of food that are healthy and beneficial. If you had to go to a hospital, they would serve you the highest quality, most nutrient dense food instead of Jell-O.
Oh, God.
All right. there's so much more that we could do. And yeah, I do think the 0 point, we're very, very close to that. That was a whole nother, one of my hobbies is studying physics. I love physics. And I always felt kind of dumb because I never could understand Einstein. I was like, wow, maybe he really was a genius and I really am dumb. No, I find out he was actually propped up, and he was used as a diversion away from Tesla.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
but everybody's going back to Tesla now and going, wait a minute.
Yes.
And who's the guy with the vortex and the Schallenberger? And, you know, there's so much that we had dropped. And then Walter Russell, there's all these incredible thinkers. And I'm really, who am I into now? The guy, oh my gosh, my name, I don't know why it's going. There's so much that is available now that we're starting to go, hey, wait a minute. And it's an incredible waking up process, and I'm so happy to see it going on. But we are going to have some really tough times because there's a lot of people right now that go, look, I just bought my Starbucks at my coffee at Starbucks, and I'm going to go see a movie on Netflix, and life is good, you know, and nothing's changing, you know. And I'm like, oh my God,
that normalcy bias is so dangerous, right? At least relative to living through this next couple of years. You know, one of the things that came to my mind is how Hollywood has infiltrated this whole thing. The show that won a bunch of awards called A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe. That show was amazing. I love that show. And then looking back on it, I realized the psyop of that show. So this guy who was Russell Crowe's, he was playing the role of this guy, I can't remember his name, but the guy who created, he won the Nobel Prize for his theory that if we collaborate, everybody wins.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of Hollywood showing the results of this theory, how this theory could infuse through humanity and change the world, they just made Russell Crowe a schizophrenic, and the whole show was about schizophrenia instead of the actual theory.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, Hollywood, I think all of that's starting to come to light now.
Yeah.
And that's what apocalypse means, is the lifting of the veil. And yes, I mean, to get ahead in Hollywood, I mean, gosh, Theo Fleury, you know, talks to you about how you get ahead in sports.
Yeah.
Is you get raped, you get statutory raped, or you know, do something horrible and they get it on film. That's what Epstein's jet was all about. That's how you get ahead in politics. And the same thing in Hollywood. And that's why it's so great that it's coming out now about the pedophilia. Oh my God, Disney, right?
Yeah.
Oh God, it's just so horrible what's going on in the world. But I'm so great that we are starting to have these conversations and recognizing that. And so, you know, you're absolutely right, Jim. We are at war, and we are humans fighting for humanity, because we are way better than that. We're way more powerful. We're way more creative. Other thing that always tripped me up in the world, that as I experienced it, is I always found that most people are really, really good. You know, they really, now some of them might be annoying as all heck out, right? You know, but, but by and large, you know, my nephew, he goes to the Keys, he goes kayaking, he picks up garbage. You know, my sister, she takes care of stray cats. I mean, everybody kind of does something that I've ever met. And most people are genuine. Like, you get into a hardship situation, and the vast majority of people are trying to help each other. Now, the media will focus on somebody running around with an AR-15, probably somebody they paid to do that.
Yeah.
And that's not what we do as humans, right? So it always mystified me that, you know, fundamentally people are really good, but then we have these systems in place that produce toxic food, or that, you know, that destroy our resources, you know, or that suppress our minds or our children. And it really does come down to that we do have this war. We have got to get free from the control of the the existing, I call them the global cabal. And it's so funny. It always comes down to we all want to eat, you know, at least a meal or two every day.
Yeah.
And in order to do this, we got to have some kind of food production going on, backyard food production. But we can, and not only is it going to be so healing, but we'll actually, it's part of being able to liberate yourself from these systems.
It is. Food literally should be everywhere.
Yeah.
Food and water should be free if people are willing to at least walk out and harvest it. And maybe if you live in Minnesota, put it in a can or a jar to save for January, or dehydrate it, or put it in a root cellar. But the foundation of life, food and water, should be absolutely free for everybody. And I'm not talking about it in a communist way. I'm simply talking about in a natural way, where nature simply provides this type of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah. No, I love the definition of insanity that Bill Mollison has. And it says, if you look outside your window and you don't see food growing, that's insane.
Yeah, I love that.
You know, you should be having food everywhere.
Yeah.
And you know that, what is that wonderful park that they did in California, where they designed it as a food forest park, and it was just a regular subdivision. Oh, the name will come to me. And they just planted fruit trees everywhere, and they designed the whole thing to like collect rainwater. And there was a subdivision across the street, very similar houses and, you know, structures, but they did not do that. And now, you know, 20 or 30 years later, the prices and the value of the houses that have the food all around them are like 3 times higher than the ones across the street.
Yes.
And it's just kind of the landscaping or the layout, you know, it's because people want to live that way, right? You know, yeah.
That's an incredible point to everybody listening. The value, the return on intention and investment of putting these systems in the ground over time is exponential.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah. We have lots of solutions.
We do. And so, Marjory, how can people support you? You've been giving your life to humanity literally for for decades, and it's not always easy, right?
No.
So I really want everybody listening to know that Marjory has incredible ways where you could turn your space, your yard, into a paradise. So how can people support you?
Yes, go to backyardfoodproduction.com. There's that free webinar. And then we'll get you onto the email list where we have all kinds of useful resources. We'll also make you a book and training bundle offer if you can afford it. It's the most cost-effective way to learn how to grow food ever. But I promise you there's more than enough free resources on our website. But honestly, if you're watching this and you've followed this conversation and you understand what we're talking about, please start growing food. Because we need you. We need you to be strong, and we need you to be healthy. We need you to be viable. We need you to be a leader in your neighborhood. And so I've got all the resources there. So go to backyardfoodproduction.com.
Awesome. Yes. Matthew, any words?
Hey, I loved this conversation. You know, your leadership, Marjory, over the past 20 years in inspiring other people to take some action on preparing themselves has been, you know, just truly remarkable. So I want to commend you on that action. And, you know, also thank you for, you know, being a part of the Earth Council with us and your leadership there. And, you know, together we do have the solutions. They are extremely simple. Now, the other side is that people need to start taking action on those things.
They absolutely do.
They're much simpler than they currently believe. And if they'll just start doing something small, that very quickly will grow into something more. And thankfully, they don't have to do it alone. They've got great people like you, like what Jim's doing, like the other Earth Council members and all the other people all over the world who have taken this step and responsibility for themselves. They're not alone. And the solutions they exist. You've got the tools at your fingertips with the internet, with you know, the resources on YouTube, with people like yourselves and us, and they're there. So, you know, it's about now stepping into your power and just taking that leap of faith and moving forward. And you're inspiring a lot of people to do so.
Thank you, Matthew. That's a wonderful summary. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marjory. And by the way, everybody listening, the Earth Council platform, the marketplace, the online community will be stood up here by the end of the year, maybe even as early as like September, October. And there, all of these resources from the Earth Council and all of the different people that we mentioned today and many more will be there for everybody. So it'll be easy access to learn how to go from wherever you are to completely free.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Marjorie. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another incredible episode of Seeds of Abundance. We look forward to seeing you all again soon. Have an amazing day.
Ciao for now. All right.